Yo, what's up? This is Koski of Fun Day, back at it for you and for yours. We're kicking this knowledge is black history. And this one right here deals with black women who was in the Muslim army. Um, Once you find out about the story about the black woman, we're gonna find out a lot more about what's going on and how things are going during this time in Muslim Spain. But black women warriors in the Muslim army besieged Valencia in the Cid victory. Problems of interpretation. Because the European, which I'm not knocking them for, that's supposed to do fair game, change the history of this stuff, which you're going to find out about it later on, later in this article. Although recent studies have shown that women played a larger role in European and American armies in modern times than the standard military histories have been prepared to acknowledge, it has never been suggested they were regarded as combatants. Individual women who wanted to fight in the ranks had to cross-dress and pass as men. Cross-dressing was apparently not unknown even in medieval Christian armies. For according to a Muslim chronicle, some of the Crusades still in action in the 12th century were discovered to men have women, but only after their quarters had been stripped on the battlefield. There were certainly no female fighting units, either then or later in European armies. Therefore, the statement in the Chaldean Chronicle, written in the 13th century, that precisely such a unit served in the ranks of the Muslim army outside of Valencia has been dismissed as legend. The purpose of this article is to show that it must be taken seriously. The Primary Chronological, the first general history of Spain, hereafter the PCG, dated Sacaria 13,000, devoted many chapters to the career of 11th century warrior Ricardo Villaz de Gar, generally known as the Cid, whose fame had made him the subject of poetry and legend. The compilers of the PCG certainly drew on this legendary material, but they also needed to use sobering Latin and Arabic chronicles. The Cid had taken Valencia in 1094 and held it in defiance of the Almoravids until his death 5 years later. The Almoravids, a Muslim sect devoted to jihad, or holy war, were Berber nomads who emerged from the Western Sahara to conquer Morocco and most of Muslim Spain. Soon after Valencia fell to Cid, Yusuf ibn Teshin, the Mohammed leader, sent his nephew with a great army to besiege and recover the city. Against all odds, the Cid and his Christian garrison routed the enemy forces on the nearby plains of Court. The Almoravids had therefore had to consider to be invincible. Hence, the Cid victory gained him a huge renown. According to the PCG, Cid died within the city of Valencia, was once again under siege by the mighty Almoravid army, encamped as in 1094 on the plain of Court. His death made it necessary to abandon the city, but first, the small Christian garrison had to attack and defeat the besieging forces. The PCG informed us that the Muslim army included a company of 300 black women who were expert archers. The history, i.e., the PGC source, tell us that at the end of 3 days after the Cid had died, King Bukovar had arrived from Tunis and disembarked at the port of Valencia with an extraordinarily large force of 36 Moorish kings, and brought back with him a black Moorish woman who had 300 black Moorish women with her. And they all of them had their heads shaved and parted from the tuft which each of them had on the top of their head. This was because they came on privilege or to seek pardon. They were well armed with cuirass and with Turkish bows. According to Avernax, who was the one that subscribed this story in Arabic, there were at least 15,000 tents, and King Badr ordered the black Moorish woman to station herself nearest to the town with all her company. She was the first to be killed by the Christians in the foray, as you shall later hear. The siege lasted 9 days, during which Cid's body was embalmed, tied, and fully armored astride his horse. When all the Christians left the city secretly under the cover of darkness, one contingent accompanied the Cid's body and waited unseen by Almoravids, while the rest, led by Almoravid, Cid's lieutenant, prepared to attack the Muslim army at dawn. The first charge was against the 10 of black Moorish women, who was in the van, and so hard was the charge that they killed a good 100 of those Moorish women before they had time to take arms and mount. But the history said that the Moorish woman was so shrewd a master archer with the Turkish bow that it was wonder to behold. And for that reason, it said that the Moors called in Arabic, Tamaria Turkish would mean the stars archer of Turkey. She was the first to ride forth, and the other 100 Moorish women in her companions with her. They brought some harm to Cid's company, but women by nature are more afraid of death than men. We're more afraid of death than men. Why we're more afraid of death than men? And the hundreds of Moorish women, her companions with her, brought some harm in Cid's company. But as women are dangerous, are more afraid of death than men, a fact which the Mountain are trained to realize. And the first to die was the one who was their leader. Other women began to flee between the tents. So great was the turmoil and confusion crested among the rest of the male troops that very few of them were able to take up arms. Instead, they turned their backs and began to flee towards the sea. In short, the women, as women will, panic and stampede the rest of the Muslim army. They and they alone were responsible for the shameful Moorish defeat. The Cid had in fact died in 1099, 2 years before the retreat from Valencia in 1101. And when Christians left the city, no battle took place. It was assumed, therefore, that the entire story was part of a legend that grew up around Cid's tomb in Castile, and the episode of the female archers was no exception. It, too, was a Christian invention. There has been one attempt by L.P. Harvey to suggest the factual basis of the story of the archers. The archers were not women, but male Tuaregs of the Sahara. Tuareg men wore the lathan or a veil, as they do to this day. And Harvey thought that the Christian eyewitnesses of Valencia mistook these veiled men for Muslim women. Moreover, Tuareg men frequently wear a linear dye, indigo blue, and dye stains in their skin. The primitive Christian eyewitness mistook the blue dye for black skin, and this explains why these women are described as negras. He suggests that the Arab sources used by the redactors of the PCG had mentioned a Tuareg or a Tuareg present in the Almoravid army. But being unfamiliar with the name, they converted the adjective Tuareg or Tuareg as both Turkish and Turkey in Arabic. In this way, textual misreading compounds the two actual errors, resulting in the invention of black women archers with their Turkish bows. The possibility that there were any women in the army is dismissed by him outright. Who will believe that a Muslim army will ever constrain a regiment of women? How monstrous. Harvey's hypotenuse expressed H. Norris, who nevertheless preferred to regard the Nehemiah as a garbled, inverted, methodical form of Zafa Yama, a legendary black-eyed Yemeni woman who could see for a distance for 3 days. Norris, however, did not explain how and why this legendary figure came to be in use in the narration of the Battle of Court. Harvey's hypotenuse has several weaknesses. First, why should one small group of army be mistaken for women, when the entire Almoravid leadership wore the latham, and the Christians were well aware of the fact? Indeed, it can scratch otherwise 8 years after being king of the Castile resounding defeat at Al-Sakara in 1086, and 4 years after the Almoravid conquest of Mosa Andalus, which is Spain. Furthermore, reinforcing Almoravid dress, i.e. veiled, had been sent to Valencia to stiffen its resistance, while the Cid was besieging the city. Half of them were Andalus Muslims who had been ordered to disguise themselves as Almoravids, a ploy that would have made no sense unless the sight of the lantern was known to have instilled fear in the beholder. By 1100 in Seville, which had been occupied by the Almoravids since 1091, steps had been taken to prevent a low caste of man from wearing the lantern, not only because it was a male badge of honor, but also because it inspired terror. The inaugural error that is therefore out of question, and quite apart from the fact that the veiled turret men, who could be seen today in photos and on film, as well as in the flesh, cannot be easily mistaken for women. Harvey thought that Abba ben Mockery of the Latham as an effeminate supported his thesis of the optical era at Valencia. But it does quite the opposite. For this kind of mockery to be effective, it must be obvious for all that the wearer of unmasculine dress is a male. Indeed, Barbara, upon whom Harvey had followed this aspect of arbitrary psychological warfare against the Almoravids, had unequivocally stated, no one will mistake veiled men for women. Second, how can a person be both bald-headed, bareheaded, revealing a shaven skull except for a top knot, and also wear a latham which covers the skull as well as the lower face, leaving only the eyes and the bridge of the nose visible? Photography referred to by Harvey as supporting his hypothesis shows an adolescent terrible boy before he reached his majority, hence is void of the latham, and his barely shaven head except for the crest on the top is fully visible. So this is the hairstyle of male children. On approach of his 20th year and significant rite of passage, the young man would have been invested for the first time with the latham. Thereafter, he would not be seen in public without it. Boys, like women and slaves, are not allowed to wear this mask of a noble warrior. The latham is usually worn as part to leave the hair uncovered, but only the back of the head, and that is revealing to be long, thick, and elaborate braided. Final and the most devastating weakness of Harvey's hypothesis is the fact that Tarek, like all barbers, never used bows as a weapon. When they needed archers, they employed their black slaves or mercenaries. But there is a major objection to Harvey's hypothesis that has nothing to do with the specific difficulties. For it is as women of the 300 archers appear in a Christian chronicle, and it is as women that they have made this part of the play to part of the narrative. Their narrative could do nothing to embellish Cid's image as a hero. The point is made forcibly in the 12th century chronicles, also written in Castile, the Chronica Imperialis, represented by Queen Malarenga on the battlefields of Toledo, addressing two Muslim generals who laid siege to the city in 1139 with her husband, Alfonso VII, was away. Do you not see that you fight against me, a woman, and there is no honor in that for you? Nor was the point lost on them, for much abashed. They retreated. Even the captured Joan of Arc, who powers regarded as supernaturals, was not a feat her male opponents cared to boast about. The Duke of Burgundy, we are told, thought them inglorious and had to fought even the victorious fight with the women. The female archers panicked, as therefore is an unsuitable illustration of the terror that Cid and his men are said to inspire and the stoutest of Muslim hearts. Indeed, Ramon Mendez Pital seemed to share Duke of Burgundy viewpoint. For despite elaborate detail which the great Canalesian scholar studied, each and every medieval source referring to his hero, the Cid, he chose to remain silent about the alleged presence of Numa Germana and her companions at the Battle of Court. In the PCG, our faint, Cid's heroic lieutenant is represented as plainly perceiving Namara and her companions to be women, and yet choosing to attack them first, as he had counted upon their native kindness. Upon the havoc their flight would cause, the chronicle therefore seemed to ignore the fact that the military reputation of the Cid's men could not be enhanced in Christian eyes if a great Christian victory was ascribed to a panic caused by a bunch of frightened females. The 16th century Chaldean ballad corrected this faux pas in the narrative. The women merely happened to be in the path of Almoravid's advance, and their panic could not contribute to even the smallest way of the victory. Alvarez was the first who charged upon with fury upon great force of the Moors. Assembled at Bakar, he found before him a beautiful Moorish, skilled at shooting arrows from a quiver with a Turkish bow. Star is what they called her because of her excellence. At striking with a javelin, she was the first who took the horse and rode forward, with hundreds of others like her, valiant and daring. With the fear, Cid's vassal charged them and left them dead on the ground. The battle is a complete divorce from what had taken place. On the one hand, the brave Nora and her companions, who are all killed before they can flee, and on the other hand, the major engagement and subsequently the rout of the Barca army. The annihilation of all the black women warriors moved any suggestion that their panic had stampeded the mass of the Muslim army. Hence, the male Christians' valor remains unsullied, and the early crash with the women reduced to a painted detail. In the story in the PCG, in which the women caused the defeat of the whole army, reveals a different point of view that indicates a particular narrative must have been something to have originated among the humiliated Muslims. Despite expertise with the bow proved valueless when it surpassed the faint-hearted females, and women's behavior is the excuse for the shameful defeat. In any case, no source concerns to glorify the Christians in battle would have represented them owing their victory to panic-stricken fighter archers. Even if the latter had been men, for Christian military circles in the 12th and 13th centuries, bowmen were beneath the notice of knights. Archers belonged to the infantry, and like them were almost never mentioned in the chronicles or chivalric poses of poetry. Archers played no role in the history of Roderick, written in 1110, or in the poem De Sumo Cid, which in its present form dates to 1200. And in the mid-14th century, Sir John de Maulle departed from his classical resources, carefully stating that the only commoner Amazons used the bow. Christine Bazin, right at the end of the century, followed suit. According to her, the Amazon assassins had a custom whereby the noble among them burnt off their left breast, so they did not hinder them from carrying shields, and they removed their right breast to the commoners to make it easier for them to shoot the bows. Upper-class Arabs, however, did not share their Christian counterparts' contempt for the archer in war. They deeply admired the skills required of a mounted bowman. Thus, there is nothing encouraging about the Muslim chronicle giving company to expert mounted archers an important role in a battle. The only anomaly here is their sex. As women, neither de Moore and her companions were good enough to be chosen especially for the front line, but they were worse than useless when it came to the fight. They managed to inflict some damage on the Christian knights who had surprised them, yet their essential femininity had caused the failure of the entire campaign. This contradiction is a sure sign of a special pleading that could not benefit none so much as the Muslim general. The contradiction was, however, required by the narrative. The women had to be good enough to be placed in key positions in order to explain why their panic had caused much havoc. It is worth noting that in the 1947-1948, during the Israel War of Independence, an exact replica of this pattern of argument surfaced among Jewish combatants and widely believed. A woman named Martha Stretcham, who was only one of two female demolition experts in the elite corps of commandos known as the Palamanch. Later in 1947, a story spread throughout the corps proved that women should never be allowed to take part in combat. Sister had been entrusted with a key role in an important operation, but her feminine susceptibilities had caused her to lose nerve at the critical moment, thus participating in feeling retreat. She had failed to blow up a bridge that was still burning, thought to be empty because she suddenly heard the cry of a child from inside of it. Meta Ben Yuda, the other female demolition officer in the patcher, later confronted her colleagues with this narrative. Should have then told her there had been no child. Edgar said she had heard no child wailing. The operation had been called off because of mistakes by the commanding officer. In order to place the blame on Chester, she had to be good enough to be given a vital task. And yet her special expertise, like Nuwa Jamalam, nearly 1,000 years earlier, had proved to be worse than useless simply because she was a woman. Contradictory roles allotted her in this narrative parallels to those of Najamuma was made to play in the PCG and serve exactly that same purpose. They excuse the otherwise shameful failure of each woman male's commander. There are two further incidents in the story of New Commander Orange from her own side. First, the women are singled out as black. No Christian source would have done this, but when a Christian wished to denigrate the Muslims, they called them all black, as a lament on the loss of Spain in the 19th century, given influence in the PCG. Their faces are black as pitch, the handsome among them as black as pot. Picard regarded the description of the women outside of Valencia as a usual Christian strategy of denigration, overlooking the fact that they were singled out from other Muslim forces. who in this narrative was not clearly regarded as black. Significantly, the battle drops the adjective altogether and calls the women simply Moors or Muslims, like the rest of the army. Only Arabs and Berbers, who always described themselves as white, could make a point of noting that the women were black. And like the Christians, they used the adjective would have meant a derogatory. Indeed, the presence of black men as low caste members in the Muslim army outside of Valencia is used by Arabic sources to describe Cid'S cruelty. In 1094, he expelled Muslim women and children from the city on approach to the Almoravids, and poor women fell into the hands of the blacks and the muleteers and the low-class traders who abused them without the Almoravid general being able to prevent this vile behavior. Second, the battle described in the PCG as taking place at courts after Cid's death shows a strikingly similarly to the Arab account of the first and only battle of court in 1094, that a terrible defeat of Almoravid army was described in some details by a Muslim contemporary, a native of Valencia named Abu Abbas Ahmed Ibn Hamakim, in 1116, who wrote a monograph on Cid conquest of Valencia. His account has survived because it's quoted by the Moroccan historian Ibn al-Azari, who wrote in or before 1306. It was common for Muslim historians to give more than one version of the event, and Almoravid quote two versions of the battle of court, one offered by his Arab source. Each version gave a different immediate cause of the battle. Although the details vary, the structure of the narrative remained the same. In both versions, the Christian forces were secretly split into two. In both versions, the Muslims fell victim to a Ra's Ghassan. In both versions, the Cid avoids a pitched battle, and in both, the Christians fell upon the Almoravid camp in surprise, causing panic and confusion, which led to Muslims' flight. These unchivalrous military tactics, which account for the Cid's astonishing victory and Arab power, are different from its heroic leadership in hand-to-hand combat and accounts is disseminated by the Christians. To demonstrate Islamic and the Christian narratives. To demonstrate that there is, in fact, a fundamental difference in the treatment of Cid tactics, it is necessary to consider both the Christian and Islamic narratives of the battle of court in great detail. In the historic records, soon after Cid's death, his victory of the Almoravids at court in 1094 is attributed entirely to the value of attacking the entire Muslim army face-to-face in pitched battle. Indeed, the Divan Memorial Cid duplicates the victory at court, which is represented by two separate battles. In each, Cid's success owes nothing to deceit. And the PCG also duplicates the battle, chapters 925 and 931. On the first occasion, the Cid permits Alvarez funds to set the ambush. But this obvious influence from Almoravid, noted by Mendes Fidel, have radically rewritten in order to remove all suspicion and lapse of chivalry. The ambush is placed nowhere near the Almoravid camp and severs much merely to clinch victory already won by Cid's valor in the open field. Only after the defeat in the fight of the Muslim army did the Christians turn their attention to the Almoravid camp and its booty. Thus, the whole thrust of the Almoravid tale has been altered, for he attributed the camp's defensive state of Christian trickery. According to him, the Cid had fainted flight after launching a surprise attack, and the Muslim army had not realized that Almoravid was laying in an ambush nearby. The latter fell upon the unguarded tents before the Muslim pursuing Cid had been defeated in a fair fight. The military ethos to which both sides paid lip service in stigmatizations such as an ignoble and cowardly. Not surprisingly, an Almoravid story of the ambush was blue penciled by the editors responsible for the PCG. In the second version of the battle of court, the PCG follows the poem and attributes that the most noblest tactics to Cid and his men. But in Almoravid's second version only scored the shameful behavior of the Christians, which he had already described in his first count. This time, the defensive camp was attacked by Cid himself, after his men had cunningly drawn away all his defenders. Almoravid does not, therefore, simply add details to the Christian account. He presents an entirely different way, and both versions of Cid's victory is presented in the shabbiest light. The story of the black women, I submit, serves exactly the same purpose. In his third version, this time blaming the confusion and fight on the Muslim army on their historical behavior. Yet the structural point remains the same. Deceit and disinformation characterize the Christian tactics, and it is the Almoravid army camp, not is their army, that's attacked at dawn before the Muslims are ready for battle. Almoravid Francis assaulted the tents of the women and killed 100 of them before they could arm themselves. Hence, the dastardly attack mode, as well as the sexes of the archers, rendered the Christian victory dishonorable. This unflattering representation of the Christian military action could have never come from a favorable source to Cid. Among the Muslims, however, he had a reputation for deceit. Thus, Ibn Basim, writing in 1109, reported that Cid had gained victory in Valencia by fraud in accordance to his custom. The story of Nujamama and her companions must, therefore, have been reported by a Muslim author, and none likely so as Ibn Akima. Why then had Ibn Akima had not quoted this version of the Muslim defeat in the Battle of Court in 1094, if he found it, like the other two, in Ibn Akima and Al-Majari? Al-Majari had often skipped sections of his sources. Hence, there was no difficulty assuming that he simply decided not to quote Ibn Akima third version. It was, however, picked up in the late 13th or early 14th century by compilers of the PCG because they needed the battle to explain the legendary removal of Cid's body from Valencia. The narrative in the PCG not only represents the women panic as a cause of general stampede, in addition, it introduced a visible manifestation of Apollo Santiago fighting at the head of the heavenly host of the Christian behalf. This has been promised by St. Peter to Cid in a vision just before he died. It is clearly part of the Christian legend, but the narrative of the PCG and the petition appears immediately after the panic-stricken flight of the archers and an effect on his army. And when Barta and the 36 kings saw the stampede, they were astounded, for it seemed to them that 70,000 knights, all of them whiter than snow, were approaching, and they were led by one banner, the rest who bore the one hand of the white banner and the other a fiery sword. And he inflicted so much death upon the fleeing Moors that Baccarat and his kings were frightened and began to flee towards the sea. Since the Muslim army had already been stampeded by the frightened female archers, apostolic intervention from up high was surely superfluous. Furthermore, the PCG tell us both that the battle began with an attack on the women's tents, and so that the Christians turned their attention to the enemy camp only after the Muslims fled at the site of Santiago. The timing of the attack of the Muslim tents is crucial and moral significance of the story, that the timing changes according to the bias of the story. So the facts that were given will support the single narrative two conflicting times of the Christian attack of the camp, indicates clearly two contradictory accounts that have been cobbled together. We are confronted with a clumsy confrontation of two sources. The Christian source explains how the great Muslim army was confounded by the vision of Santiago. The Muslim source blaming it all on the women. The former is purely legendary. The question is was the latter equally so? Diego Cantin has shown his entire version of the last section of the PCG, in which the package concerning Cid of Valencia are asserted, was edited very badly. Hence the obvious failure to rewrite the passage that made Almoravid Francis deliberately choose to attack the women archers first, and hence too, apparently redundant of Santiago in a battle that, according to Almoravid, had already been won by the Christians. But how can Ibn Almoravid expect such a story to be convincing if the notion of women warriors in the Almoravid army was to serve as Harvey and everyone else and interest in history of El Cid have assumed? Surely the excuse must have been some verisimilitude to be effective. The noting of women going to jihad was not entirely alien to the early traditions of Islam, but its effect only a few isolated individuals. Muhammad first had to beg the Prophet for permission to fight in the Holy War, and even then she was accompanied by her husband. and Kawab bin Azan, descendant of the Arabian kings, cross-dressed and passed as a man. By the earlier 12th century, even cross-dress was no longer represented in Arab chronicles due to the desire of individual Muslim women to go to war. The Summa tells of a woman who was dressed in full armor and was taken for a man when she entered a threatened castle. But her disguise was meant merely to shame only the male warriors present, her kinsmen, and the putting up a fight. She herself had no intention of engaging in combat. Moreover, these isolated anecdotes was need to be rendered the role of the negress Norma Milan and her company credible. Berber society, however, did provide a favorable text. Arab travelers never failed to remark on the characteristic of freedom of Berber women, especially among the nomads of the Sahara. Tuareg women do not wear the veil, nor did the Almoravid princesses. The Almoravid came from tribes whose lineal descents were matrilineal. This is still true today in Tuareg, despite the centuries-long pressure of Islam. Consequently, women enjoyed a status very different from that of a Muslim woman in Arab and Arab societies. So pause right here. With a matrilineal society, it showed that these Berbers were black Africans, because that don't happen in Arab society, as just said right here. You know, they don't really get that kind of love in Arab or Arab societies. A high gender status is necessary if a female warrior role for a woman is to seem natural. The high status of Tuareg women is also indicated by the fact they eat with men, except for one group where the women eat before men, who have made to do with the remnants. When Ibn Battuta visited Walatada in the southwest Sahara in the 14th century, he was astounded to find that the Mustafa women here were more important than the men, and that the Mustafa were the Lemafan, the founding tribes of the Almoravid sect. Tuareg and Tuareg women have ruled as tribal chiefs and led their people to battle. Berber resistance to the Arabs in the 17th century, in the 7th century, was led separately by Kahina, and the latter was the mother of sons. In the 15th century, a woman named Kowa bin Kabai was the chief of the Sudan, and she led her people in battle for many years until she was finally defeated by the Songhai emperor. Even in the late 19th century, a Tuareg woman, Bakashado of the Lizangham, was a young wife, left her husband to go to war. To do so, she donned on LinkedIn and removed it whenever she turned home from a raid. Thus, one condition was present to make the story of the female archers possible. The Almoravids came from a society that did not disregard the idea of women warriors as self-contradictory in terms of gender. Yet the Berber women who have acted as generals in history are always described as commanding men, not women, and as exceptional individuals, not captain of females, cohorts under the ultimate command of men. The only exception is Abazin, the legendary Libyan queen, who, according to Cid'S Atilius, 101 CE, joined Hannibal's army at the siege of Santantum in the modern day near Valencia in 219 BCE. She captained a cohort of women warriors, and like Nujarama, was killed in battle during the siege. Alcibiades has said that been an invention entirely inspired by the inscription of Camilla and the Algedon. But Camilla's troops are not explicitly to be women. Her squadron has just been well made up of men. The only women with her in battle were 3 chosen companions and a childhood friend. Furthermore, Camilla carried a quiver into battle, where Alcibiades, a true Berber, was not associated in any way with the use of the bow. Both women are described as having one breast bared when going into battle, but Camilla does this only for the fight, for the freedom in the fight, and appears fully clothed when not engaged in combat, where Abba's bare breast is linked to her native custom. Thus, she initially wore a robe that left one breast exposed, just as some Tuareg women have been observed to do in the 20th century. The figure of Alcibiades is thus not an entire exact replica of the Camille and owes at least as much of the ancient Berber influences. The story of Alcibiades, like that of Camille, is lumped together with accounts of the Sumerian, Scythian, and Amazon that can be found in the ancient Greek authors. and indeed both in Virgil's and Cilicius mention the Amazon and describing the two heroines. However, both ancient Greek and later accounts of the Amazon may be well sexist interpretations of chronological fact, distorting reflecting the fear and fascination around a patriarchal conditioned man when contemplating both the reality and the reports of women warriors. Among the pastoral and nomadic tribes in the Caucasus and the steep lands of Asia, women rode and fought alongside men. And it's now believed probable that in Africa too, young women forming separate warrior groupings who lived apart from men for a fixed period to avoid pregnancy were the basis of legends about man-hating Amazon nations. But though the story of Amazon and her company support the idea of young female cohort in ancient Libya did military service before they was married, that story cannot explain why a Muslim author, writer over 1,000 years later, could imagine that his account of the havoc caused by the draws to the Almoravid army by female warriors within their ranks could be believed. The presence of Nugarama and her companions could only serve as an excuse for an astounding defeat of a male general. If the Almoravids had come familiar in the 11th century with organized units of female warriors prior to their invasion of Spain in 1086. The obvious place to look is the medieval kingdom of Ghana, which dominated the area between Upper Senegal and the Niger rivers in West Africa. From the start, Almoravid leaders had acted in alliance with the kingdom of Ghana against neighbor chieftains. It is not certain that the Ghana ruler, who had already converted to Islam, but did he supply the Almoravids with auxiliaries for their holy war in Spain? There is much to suggest that the women's warriors may have been included in the Senegalese contingencies, especially during the 1094 campaign against Valencia, when the empire resources and manpower were under heavy strain. Female regiments fighting in the otherwise male army have been reported by the Europeans in various parts of Black Africa since the 16th century. As for the Western Sudan, the region in which Ghana had become so powerful by the time of the Battle of Course took place in 1094, there is irrefutable evidence of a military unit there, but they have been photographed. In the 19th century, the King of Dami's elite troops were women. They have frequently been described in the 3 points of concern of them, and especially relevant to the text of the PCG under discussion. First, these Amazons, as the Europeans called them, were famous for their courage. Second, their crack corps had originally consisted of archers before they were replaced by musketeers. Third, one group among them had shaven heads, leaving only a few up on top, just like Noramana and her company. The origin of the Dome Amazons cannot be traced beyond the beginning of the 18th century. But the story explaining the decision to use women only then is suspicious of contradictions, suggesting that it was tailored to be fit for sexual expectations of the European who were asking the question. Stenengrave, who was the first white man to write about them, was oddly astonished at their military role and must have asked reasons for using them. He was told at once in a moment of crisis, when the king's army was too exhausted to take forces of a rebellious vassal, King Adrian, 1708 to 1730, not wanting retreat, had placed women in the rear in order to trick the enemy to thinking that his army was much bigger than it was. The rules had worked, and the rebels had been totally demoralized. Thereafter, the women continued to be recruited and becoming the pick of the king's Domi's army. The contradiction in this narrative of the origins of birth, as is the mirror image. The contradiction in this narrative of female archers at courts, and necessarily so, for if the Domi Amazons were success stories and not the excuse for defeat. It is extraordinary that this narrative should have everyone satisfied with respected logic. Yes, Snellengrave clearly did not regard it as fishy, nor did any other white man who have repeated the tale in the 19th and 20th century. Not one of them has wondered how the transformation of women from fake soldiers employed as a pistol island into crack regiments of the King Army was it even contemplated, much less put into effect. There can be little doubt that a mechanism similar to reported by Radate was at work. He confessed that he was surprised to discover the extent of the Queen Mother's judicial and political authority in traditional Shanti society.
authority totally ignored by the British administration. I have asked the old men and women why did I not know this, having spent many years in the Asante. The answer always the same. White men never asked us this. You have dealings with us and recognize only men. We suppose the European consider women of no account, and we know you do not recognize them as we have always done. Although Snowgraves himself has observed the important role of the military role of the dummy Amazon and his intercolloques have hardly failed to notice of his astonishment or his assumption that women are of no account. It is quite possible, therefore, that the information has been self-centered to minimize the scope and antiquity of the role played by the women warriors in Dami. European men, after all, had never refused a woman a walk-on part in a military emergency. This is even true of Spain in the Middle Ages. Thus, in the 8th century, according to legend, the women of Jacon, the ancient Pyrenees capital of Aragon, successfully misled a Muslim army by masquerading on the walls as reinforcements freshly arrived from Francia. After the Christian defenders fighting the Emir army on the plain below had begun to flag, the Muslims were taken in and withdrew. The story is an almost exact replica of the one that allegedly explained the origins of the dummy Amazons. The non-sequitur between the latter and the repetitive meetings of their sequential military career is only emphasized by a perfectly understandable failure of the women of Jacon. Thereafter, a metamorphosis of elite of the king's Aragon army, but the women corps in the army of Dami represented no more than a variation of dual-sex systems of political organization common to West Africa and pre-colonial times, and not completely obliterated even today, despite the spread of Islamic Christianity. This alone will argue the probability that the Amazons of Dami had roots in the distant past, and indeed, right in 1988, Helen de Marantipor had indicated that there is now some evidence to suggest that the first women warriors perhaps already existed before the kingdom of Dami was founded in the 17th century. And second, the Amazons of Dami were merely continuing an ancient custom of inhabitants of the Dami plain. It has been suggested furthermore that in the terracotta statues of women armed with cutlasses in Ise near Efe in southwestern Nigeria have been dated to 1100 AD and should link the women warriors of Dami and may have come from there. Alternatively, they may have come from Oya near the bend of the Niger. It is not our interest that some of the women had participated in these statues had shaven heads except for a tuft on top. Certainly, the 15th century bronze statue found in Benin, Dami, which depicts a princess standing on a podium embossed with a bow and arrow, suggests that long before the beginning of the 18th century, women were experts in archery on the Dami plateau. Like the Eshi statues, sculptures found in Efe are closely linked to the Benin's bronze statues. There is no evidence of contact between the corner of West Africa and medieval Ghana. Yet this proves little since Benin and Efe were not visited in the 11th and 12th century by Muslims and Muslim merchants from the north. And everything we know of Ghana comes from their report. They do not seem to have gone beyond far of the Gato in the middle Niger, and Gato by 1100 was already in touch with Almoravid Spain. Ife lays 100 miles to the west of the Niger as it flows south to the coast, while Old Oyo was only a half a distance away from the river. The trails linking northeast and southeastern Nigeria pass through both centers of the early date. Thus, although no firm archaeological evidence points to contact of the north has yet come to light, it is obvious in the continent of the Niger, linking Efe and the Old Oyo to Goyo as early as 1100 AD. One thing at least is clear: the regiment of women warriors were known in the western Sudan, and therefore it's not inconceivable that a company of female archers might have served with the Ghana Almoravid allies in Spain in 1094. Indeed, evidence from the PCG may have been regarded as pernicious addition to our meager knowledge of Black African society and sex roles in the Middle Ages. So far, I have brought general arguments of probability. There is, however, something approaching direct evidence for female units from the Basilan, or the land of the blacks, serving in the Almoravid army, and thereby providing a realistic background of Almoravid needs in order to lend credibility to a third explanation of the Almoravid disaster outside of Valencia. This evidence concerns a misreading, but is less arbitrary than the one suggested by Harvey. Almoravid, the 12th century Arab geographer, in describing Tatar and its territories along the Senegal that lay under hegemony of Ghana in the late 11th century, tells us that a certain reed called shakar grows on the riverbanks, and that was used by the inhabitants to make bows and arrows. This datum was picked up and repeated by Ibn Said in the 13th century, but was never used again. Shakarin is a singular type of species of reed that is modified by a translation. A single species of reed that in modern translations of Arizals and Ibn Said, the translators do not pretend to know what it means and simply translate the term. The uniqueness of the term of shakari kind of reed is born out of the fact that Dozin, in its supplement of Dictionary Arabs, gives Aldrich as the sole source of the sense of the word. Al-Ghanati, writing in 1160, said that he had Tadarin, or especially a brilliant star, with Venus Astrak. Nuzul-Rama's name may indeed have been triply determined. It is a familiar name among Arab speakers. It is fitting a metamorphical significance, and it had resonated a link to the ancient Berber traditions. Immediately, a link between the Libyan late Tran and the Nimrod name is highly speculative. But as a hypotenuse, it is surely no more probable than the suggestion that Nimrod has been misleading for Nadrab, Arabic for a male commander. However, a fair defender of the reason of calling a captain of archers Nuwa Jaman does not affect my argument in order to play the role of allotting her and a Muslim defeat at court. She and her company cannot have been fragments of the imaginations. Nimrod religion is uncertain as to the origin of her name. Even if the ruler of Ghana had converted Islam by 1094, most of the subjects remained pagan. Yet the Almoravids were willing to use them as auxiliaries. After all, in c. 1110, if not earlier, the Almoravids were beginning to even use Christians from Spain as auxiliary troops in North Africa. Religious propriety would, however, require all still pagan reinforcements in the Holy War against Christian infidels to represent as Muslims in the Chronicles. Consequently, in a third Arabic version of the Battle Courts, Nuzul Marama and her companions seem to be described as devout Muslims on jihad. But the Arabic term of jihad or holy war would have created a ideologically than rather than existing problem for the Christian translator. He saw that by his circumlocution that was used of the fact that the crusade, the only holy war he can acknowledge, was conceived by the church to be in addition both a pilgrimage and appearance. Alternatively, the Arabic original may have used another term associated with jihad, the rabi. Black women described outside of Valencia were clearly not seen as sexually available. The PCG linking to vows to the concept of pilgrimage strongly suggests that the vow required a sexual abstinence, if not virginity. Upon arriving in Mecca, the pilgrimage of the Hajj must abstain from sex until the pilgrimage is complete. But if the Arabic origin of the Castile text spoke not of the Hajj, but of service in the Rabi, a particular honest form of holy war, then Nujama and her company would have been seen as sexually taboo as if they had been to Mecca or the pilgrimage. Sexual abstinence was required for all those who did military service in the Rabi on the frontiers of Islam, and to do such a service was considered more perfect penance than many days and nights fasting and keeping vigil. This is true for men who did not have any additional problems of avoiding pregnancy. When confronted with pre-menopause women serving in a mixed army, it was more than likely, therefore, that behind a phrase laid in Arabic text describing them in our company as female rubber band, or at least volunteers with jihad, a term that we know that African members used in connection with the general mobilization of forces for the campaign leading to the Battle of Courts in 1094. Yet it is unlikely that Aurora and her companions were far more superficial Muslims, if indeed they were Muslims at all. From the start in Ghana, circling amulets and circling covers to Islam lived together in interdependence. In the 14th century Mali, Ada Binyata was confronted with the stunning examples of cynicism. Even in modern times, between alliances between Amanist rulers and Muslims have been common. Although Ibn Teshin is said to employ 4,000 Sudanese auxiliaries in Spain already by 1087, mounted female archers from Takar on the Senegal need not actually have been present at the court in order to provide a useful excuse for military fiasco there in 1094. It was sufficient enough to have such troops to serve on at least occasion under Almoravid command in the Maghreb for excuse to seem reasonable. Ibn al-Manin, like many cultivated Andalus Muslims, was no blind devotee of the Almoravids. He unsufficiently involved the fate of Valencia under Cid to have taken malicious pleasures and repeating the tale. The malice would have been a double-edged sword. For Muslims who believe in Oriental construction agenda, Ibn Aman, writing after an immediate influence of the fall of Valencia to Cid, must have considered the role of black women's warrior in this version of disaster as credible to both armies. He may have also intended to serve as a warning against future use of female troops by the Almoravids, either in Andalus or North Africa. The point the scene had been taken for the use of female troops was not an item of Ibn Tas's dossier against the Almoravids, written some 30 years later. Once Christian occupation of Valencia in 1094 had been seen to be short-lived, female troops were no longer used outside of the Sudan. The story of panicking females whose timid female nature allegedly outweighed their expertise as archers was seen by later Muslim chronicles as far too unidentifying to be repeated and calmly dropping their general histories of the period. Ironically, it survives only in the Christian record. Informing the reader of this text enables us to recover a submerged piece of women military history, which is also a cautionary tale about dangers of tokenism in combat units of any army. But the story of Nuzul, as it appears in the PCG, giving an obvious source of a sexist excuse by Muslim males for military failure, and a significant question beyond whether women indeed fought in Almoravid armies. The story disappears from later Arabic chronicles and is such an interpretation by European scholars as a Christian invention, together constitutes a striking illustration of the blind spots, especially pleading and shared incredibly, that occur when different conceptions of femininity belong to different cultures, normally separated from each other by vast distances, are expected to merge into one belief. The narrative, and when the narrative is interpreted without reference to female literary criticism or even colonial concepts of gender equality in Black Africa. So there you have it. They wrote these women out the history book, and the Battle of Valencia in 1094 and back again in 1100 is a major battle in Moorish Spain history. You know, because the Christian flipped the battle around to say that a great Moorish king, Almoravid king, got beaten, Yusuf ibn Tafet, which was false, by Cid, or the Cid. But the Cid was dead by then. You know what I'm saying? So they got to try to make it match. Another way, too, is with the female army, as you said, learned from Senegal and from Ghana around that area that came out there to fight and made them the blame of the story. You know what I'm saying? Which is another not true thing. It was just bad Germanship, it was just bad generalship on the Moors at that part. Anyway, you know, there's much love to get this history out. Let it be known. Much love to you and yours. Click subscribe to the channel. You know what I'm saying? Hit that like button, because all we're doing is dropping Black history. Peace.